Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to ask Joel Leong, who is on our forum committee and was able to get the services of our guest speaker today to do that. And so, Joel, would you please introduce Miss? You have to stand and you have to use the mic up close.
Okay. So first of all, I'm going to do is there's a handout to pass around. It is recent PPIC publication. So if you have an interest, you can scan the QR code or take a photo. So first thing I'm going to do is read from the script that you've all got on your emails, and it's from the PPIC website. Then I'm going to kind of reorder the script, and then I'm going to say a few things off the script. So let's see how this goes. So Tani Cantil-Sakauye, is that close? Okay. Yeah, I almost got it right. Is president and CEO of the Public Policy Institute of California, where she holds the Walter and Esther Hewlett Chair in Understanding California's Future. So from 2011 to 2022, she served as the 28th Chief Justice of California. And led the judiciary as the chair of the Judicial Council, the constitutional policy and rulemaking body of the judicial branch, the first person of color and the second woman to do so. She was elected statewide as the Chief Justice of California, served more than 20 years on appellate court, the California appellate court and trial courts, was appointed or elevated to higher office by 3 governors, and I believe they were governors who were across the aisle on both sides, right? No? All Republicans, all right. So the aisle was a lot narrower back then. So congratulations on that. Okay, let's see. Oh, so I'm going to reverse this last paragraph a little bit. So she got her degrees, BA and JD from UC Davis. And then she started in the Sacramento County DA's office, I believe. And then I'm assuming went on to judgeships from there and then got your appointment. Okay. So, all right, that's the script. Off script, if you haven't seen her in action, she typically moderates boards, what's coming up, and the most, panels of various nonpartisan type topics. So, and what's coming up is, I believe it's next Friday. It's on Proposition 50. Yeah, redistricting. So if you're interested, you have to register. It's free, and it's at the Sheraton typically, Sheraton downtown. And I'm going to also say another thing. So as Renaissance Society members, you probably study a lot about California history. So if you know early California history when it became a state, you might know how many women practiced law or judges or even could vote. So feel free to give a huge hand to our speaker for breaking the glass ceilings there today.
Thank you, Deanna. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Joel, for that gracious and fun introduction. It is true I was appointed under 3 different governors, but I had to work most closely with Jerry Brown 2.0. And I could tell you stories about that, all good, but the way to his heart is chocolate chip cookies. So, but it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I've been to the Renaissance Society before some years ago when I was the Chief Justice of California and had the opportunity. And when Joel reached out to me at PPIC, I was really pleased to do so because you have been, at least in my experience, a very astute organization of people. And your questions have been interesting and wise and well-read. So when I get an opportunity to be in front of a crowd like yourselves, especially for PPIC, our Public Policy Institute of California, I really do want to have that dialogue with you about California, because that's the sole reason that PPIC exists, to inform and improve public policy. And we really want questions and inquiries about what is happening and why isn't it working and what have we done in the past based on the data, and we let the facts speak for themselves. So many years ago, actually only 2.5 years ago, when I was the Chief Justice of California, I left the position. And many, many lawyers and judges said, my gosh, why did you leave? How could you leave? You're at the top. You're the top judge in California. California's judiciary is the largest law-trained judiciary in the United States and probably the world. You've done 12 years. All you have to do is stand for another retention election where no one can run against you. It's an up or down vote. Why would you leave? And I thought, I have spent 32 years in a black robe. Isn't that an answer enough? I mean, prior to that, any legal professionals in the room? Prior to that, right, being a legal professional, so add in another, at least, so round up 40 years. And also because while it was a labor of love to run the largest law-trained judiciary, remember that all judges are independently elected, so they have no true boss. So even though I was the Chief Justice of 2,000 plus judges, I was not their boss. So I had to win the hearts and minds of every judicial officer to get them to agree to policy changes, to education, to be on numerous committees. It was a labor of love. I worked with 6 really brilliant colleagues, but in my time on the judiciary as the chief, I was there for 12 years. I went through 5 different justices on the court. I never had a group of those of us who had been there for 30 years together, like the former Chief Justice Ron George, a fabulous, brilliant man. He had his colleagues for like 25 years. It was a marriage. It was a long-term marriage. I kept seeing a revolving door of people coming and going and having to train up each one and having to learn what they wanted and how they operated. It was still a labor of love. But really, I was living in San Francisco. My husband and my daughters are here in Sacramento. I'm shuffling back and forth. I'm all over. And I had to stand for retention. And I said, well, what more could I do here? I felt like I'm leaving the branch in the best position it could possibly be, the best budget. Jerry Brown and I finally had an agreement on our budget. He asked me if I was happy. I finally said yes. We were in a place, we were coming out of, I took the branch through the recession, closed countless courtrooms and courthouses, laid off hundreds of people at the administrative level. And then we reached a warm period, and then COVID hit, and I took the branch through COVID. And COVID was a time in the judiciary, like you remember 5 years ago, there were no rules. We were making it up as we were going. And people were really seriously ill, and people were passing away, and we didn't know why in the early months. So I had to do things that weren't in the Constitution, that didn't involve case law. I one day woke up and said, okay, today I'm closing every jury trial in California. If you're in jury trial right now, end it today. I became no one's friend, but I believe it had to be done. And because we didn't know, and I didn't want the public coming in, sitting in juries. I didn't want transportation of inmates coming in who had to take these bus rides from the prisons, and who knew what kind of testing was going on in the prisons. And I also then, for all of the landlord owners, I apologize, but I closed the eviction courts. I said, we can't be evicting people when we have a stay-in-place order from the governor and from every mayor and city council and county board of supervisors in California. No one liked that either. There were a lot of things we just had to make up because we didn't know, we'd never had a contagion this fluid. And so I looked in the histories and the annals of the California Supreme Court about, well, surely during Spanish flu they had something. So I looked it up, and all I could find in the files was a cartoon of one of those medieval doctors with a beak nose in a judge's robe outside holding court. That was the only guidance. And so at the end of COVID, we got everybody back up. Here's the best part. A woman senator from California for the state Senate, Hannah Beth Jackson, asked me, she knew she's a lawyer by trade. She asked, what can I do for you? And I said, well, you could legalize everything I did during COVID. And so she was really helpful in reviewing all of that work and then passing a law in California that legitimized everything that happened in the past. And so while I was sued on numerous fronts, none of them succeeded, but we were really trying to do the best we could by making sure we could deliver due process and your day in court in a timely way, but not unnecessarily be a super spreader and hurt people. So I say this all because during this entire time, I'd been a huge fan of PPIC. I was a consumer of their products. I used their arguments when I needed to make a policy change to run the judiciary. And at the time I was thinking about putting in my papers to run again for another 12 years, talking to my husband about that. I also learned there was an opening at the PPIC top at the president and CEO level because their long-term president and CEO, Mark Baldessari, was going to retire and write a book with his wife on direct democracy in California. And so I thought that was interesting, was maybe interested. And so it came to be that they offered me the position as president and CEO of PPIC. And while it's a nonprofit, charitable trust, nonpartisan, it was what it has in common with the judiciary is we need the facts first. We only operate off of the facts. We are constantly in negotiations with organizations for their data, where we operate off of data, and we operate to let only the facts speak for themselves. And it's so much like the judiciary. We let the jury decide the facts in most instances. And then once the jury has made its determination of the facts, then the judge steps in to apply the law to the facts as the jury found them. And as you know, in appellate work, either at the Court of Appeal or even on the Supreme Court, we reviewing judges, we pay all attention to the facts. We don't ever vary off the facts. We just accept those as true because a jury found them to be so, or a bench trial judge found them to be so, or they were stipulated. And now from the facts, we begin our work. And so that is much like PPIC. It's 30 years young, and we are, I want to say, an independent premier think tank because luckily the vision of 3 people really made it possible for us to be able to withstand 30 years of the ups and downs of a donor public. And luckily we haven't been involved in the federal cuts that we're seeing at all levels of research and think tanks. We have been doged, as we like to call ourselves, but we seem to have passed the test because they keep paying what they owe us on our monthly grants that they have entered into when we first started some of our research. So at the Public Policy Institute of California, we started 31 years ago with the vision of 3 men who had nothing in common particularly, except that they all thought California needed an independent, nonpartisan research institute that wasn't in academia. And they didn't want it in academia because they thought we would have more freedom outside of the academic world to be able to do and follow the research that California needed. And these 3 men were Hewlett of Hewlett-Packard, R.J. Miller, who was one of the Ford whiz kids, and at the time of PPIC's creation, he was the Dean of Business at Stanford Business School. And also Roger Hines, who at the time was the Chancellor of Berkeley. So these 3 men of these institutions decided we should create PPIC and we shouldn't call it after ourselves because then future people will never donate or never really listen to it because it's going to be and sound like our own politics or our own belief or our own media. So they named it the Public Policy Institute of California, and they gave us back 30 years ago sort of a sum of money, a nest egg, which we have invested for the last 30 years very conservatively, only basically to cover our operating costs, not to become rich. So therefore, no investment in cryptocurrency, no investment in Bitcoin, no investment in AI. We are just standard, walk the line with our investments so that we can continue to pay our 85 employees. Our core of employees are researchers. of course. And we are in Sacramento, and we are also in San Francisco. Although I have always said, I don't know why we're in San Francisco, because all of our work seems to be in Sacramento. Every Wednesday, I'm in the legislature along with a lot of folks from PPIC. We take our research and we bring it to the different members and the different committees that are actually doing that work. So at PPIC, we study approximately 8 areas. I think our premier product is our survey. 8 times a year, we do a statewide survey. We're one of the few institutions that actually does a statewide survey. And Mark Baldessari, the former PPIC president, is our survey director. And we get independent funds for our surveys. And we ask about California's environment, California's governance. We're going to have one that we're releasing on the redistricting issue come, I think, early October soon. They were working hard to get it out to the public in order to do the survey. We did one on the environment. We asked about energy. We did one on civics. We asked about the Constitution, state and federal, and how important it is, or how important it is that public schools engage young people to participate and discuss civics in their world. We also, besides survey, we study a number of things. We have an economic policy center that studies labor and business. We have a water policy center that studies water policy and climate and land and air in California. We have a higher education center. We work a lot with Sac State because we focus on community colleges, the CSUs, and the UC system, public higher education in California. We also have a criminal justice advisory team of researchers. We have a safety net. As you know, those programs like CalAIM, CalFresh, SNAP, Medi-Cal, Medicare, for all of those vulnerable families in California. And we talk about and write about the policies and what's working and what isn't. We also have a research team that studies TK through 12 and to determine how young people are doing, how the funding is, where there are problems in California. And we have something that I am chair of, and it's called Understanding California's Future. This is a flexible research team that studies those issues that California is looking at that no one seems to really be providing nonpartisan, fact-based information. So just last month, we did a half-day speaker series event free to the public with breakfast and lunch included. Just sign up or see it online at the convention center. And we talked about powering California's future. Will there, in fact, be gasoline at $8 a gallon? We brought in 4 panels for that as an example. And we brought in Chevron's president who flew in to talk about gasoline, petroleum, the refineries closing. We brought in the chair of the California Energy Commission, the vice chair, Siva Gunda. His name might sound familiar because Governor Newsom has been sending him letters telling him to keep those refineries in California. And somehow those letters keep getting public. And so we're all reading it and trying to figure out what his response is. And then the Energy Commission had a multi-report with multiple recommendations. We brought in the nonprofit that represents people who have to pay the utility bills. California's utility bills, I don't need to tell anyone in this room, are outrageous. The pump is outrageous. We brought in the counties to say, you know, counties, you have a lot of competing demands. You're told to build houses. You're told to try to find room for data centers. You're told to find solar farms. You're told, oh, by the way, you have to reduce groundwater use in California in the Central Valley for at least 500,000 acres. And if you don't do it, it'll be 900,000 acres you're going to have to fallow. So we brought in a number of different speakers who speak to California's energy and all the pieces of it. So just for example, at Water Policy Center, we talk a lot about headwaters. Water, where water originates, right? Water originates in the Northern California mountains and in the Sierra Cascades. But water can't originate when that land is on fire. Water can't originate when there's fuel on the ground. And so what we also know is that over the years, the snowpack in California is declining. And so we can't rely on the same amount of energy and water we expected from the snowpacks. Right, our anticipation is precipitation will remain the same we think, over the next 2 decades. But because the climate is getting hotter, we're going to lose more water to evaporation, to wildfires, to headwater problems, so that we have to now talk about climate resilience, climate adaptation, climate mitigation. And because we're talking about the headwaters, we also have to talk about our freshwater ecosystems. So water policy is busy on that kind of work. And we just now recently decided we're going to study tribal rights water. People are afraid of that report. That report's probably going to come out next year. And we already know that it has a lot of information about the history of California, the history of the United States, intertwined with those water rights. And as many of you know, tribal nations see water as a family member. So when they care for it, when they fish from it, when they work around it, when they spread it, it is caring for a family member. We think about it very differently. We do a lot of studies across the board. I'll share some exciting studies. I think they're all exciting, but I'm kind of nerdy like that. And then I have a chock full of information in my head. But I will say to you, very often I'm asked, is California swimming or is California sinking? And I kind of say yes. Because it really sort of depends on where you are. If you are on the coastal communities of California, you are big into electric vehicles. You probably have a significant declining student K through 12 enrollment in your school districts. You probably have most people with 4-year college degrees and beyond. But if you live inland or more rural, urban areas, it's a different story for you, right? So if we know Inland Empire and we know San Bernardino County, that's where we probably have the fewest number of 4-year degree attainment. And the truth is that we know from our Economic Policy Center that a lot of the jobs in the Inland Empire and in San Bernardino don't require a 4-year college degree. But the converse of that is that while there might have been a growth of jobs during COVID and beyond in those 2 counties, they're not mortgage-paying jobs. They're poverty-level wages. So the growth is hard. And so those 2 counties and the Central Valley, like Fresno, San Joaquin, they see a lot of young people move out and never move back in because they can't find the jobs they need to live the life they want. So the Economic Policy Center does a lot of work on the labor side and the business side. What interested me was the fact that there's so many factual tidbits, but what interested me was that the boomer generation, our generation, which ranges a number of decades, is the most educated generation that exists at this point, considering Gen Z, Gen X, and today I learned a new one, Gen Alpha. I didn't know that, but I guess that's elementary school kids. So we are looking at a significant brain drain per our Economic Policy Center because boomers, older generations are retiring or taking less work, and younger people have a different thought and approach about how they work and how long they work and where they work. But if you tie that to economic prosperity in California, there's something that the Department of Finance says you need like 4 working adults full time to pay for 1 retiree's pension. There's some formula. I had that wrong probably, but there is a formula and it's at risk, we know. And so Economic Policy Center puts forth all of these kind of points about what's happening in California with an aging population. And my unit, my team, the Understanding California's Future, we study aging and the adult population, the governor's plan on the aging, the master plan on aging, because aging we know is going to change everything about where and how we live. But it is especially acute for communities of color who also happen to be maybe English language limited. And so there are going to be new and different challenges with that portion and population of an aging community, on top of the fact that we already have a housing crisis, which I don't need to tell anyone about. We also are looking at, with economic policy, and a lot of our teams work together to try to understand the bigger picture of California. So we also know that for an aging population and for the birth of a new generation, we need childcare and elder care. But we also know that those jobs typically again, from our research, goes to a lot of, it's very female oriented. It's very young female oriented, and it's also very people of color oriented. And so wages are so low in childcare and elder care that young people who go into that kind of work have to have some kind of safety net assistance. But they have to be careful that they don't earn too much because they'll lose the safety net support. And so we kind of keep people in a bubble that is kind of a Hobson's choice of opportunity, if you can call it that, for them and their family. So Economic Policy Center sort of touches environment. We did a lot of work on climate and where the good paying jobs are. The good paying jobs are fossil fuel jobs. And those fossil fuel jobs are people who are generally in the middle of their 50s. And those people generally don't have a college degree. And they live in places like Kern and Martinez and Bakersfield. And what happens to those communities when they lose a source of economy and what they lose a generation that was paying for education for everybody else? So those are the kinds of things water policy works with economic policy. And then, of course, our K through 12 research team together teams up with our higher education center. And we know a lot of things about the declining population of students K through 12 nationwide. But we know that California and New York seem to be leading. And part of that is, according to Understanding California's Future data, is that our birth rate is flat. Young women aren't having children. Young women are in college. Young men are not. Our numbers show in higher education, we've sort of lost a generation of men. We don't know where they are. They're 18 to 34. And they're not in college, and they're not in employment. So we haven't figured that out, and we don't know actually how to reach that population. But we do know, right, when we're talking about economic policy and we're talking about higher education and K-12, birth rate is flat. And we also know that after COVID and death rates went up, and we also know that immigration, as of late, has really just ended in California. And that has repercussions in economic policy and in ag, and in water, and in healthcare, and in education. So we also know that community colleges we're really pushing, and we've been supportive and had some changes in the law as a result of some of our reports on trying to ease high school students into community college. So dual enrollment and transfer. So probably a lot of you are like me. We were in dual enrollment before I even had a name, right? We were at a school. I went to McClatchy, and in my senior year, I walked down to City College and took courses. They didn't have a name for it then, but now it's called dual enrollment. But they make it easier now because some community colleges actually bring teachers from the community college into the high school to teach transfer level English, transfer level math, and to ease young people into getting into a community college, because we know, whether people want to or not, the single greatest indicator and protection against economic recession and depression is a four-year degree. We also can tell you across the board, a four-year degree over the years will reap higher wages and economic benefits that aren't available with a high school degree. So we study the ability to transfer into a university, a CSU, or a UC from a community college. We have doubled down on dual enrollment, and we are doubling down on transfer. So I'm sure many of you also, like myself and my husband, we went to Sacramento City College, and then we transferred to UC Davis because it was inexpensive, because my parents, probably like your parents, didn't go to college. So we were on our own. We didn't have the internet that gave us away. There were no programs that told us how to get this. We just showed up every day in the counselor's office and said, I want to go to UC. I want to go to UC. What are my requirements? What are they today? Am I there? So, you really had to be your own advocate back then to be able to do a transfer. So now what we're doing at PPIC is we're really trying to get all of the CSUs, and they all have varying different, some things transfer, some things don't. This is when you can, this is when you can't. We're trying to get some uniformity among the 116 community college districts and the CSUs so that it's simple. The path is easy to go from a high school to a community college, spend 2 years and spend another 2 years and get out. Why 4 years? Why 2 and 2? Because Pell Grants don't last that long. Because funding received from the state and the federal only lasts so long. So if you run out of it while you're in a community college, while you're spinning your wheels trying to figure out how to transfer, you're really not doing yourself any good, and people end up dropping out and not completing, and worse yet, carrying debt as a result. So we study this at PPIC, and we make recommendations, and we bring together all the higher education folks. We bring them together because we're like, what can we do? We just had a higher education meeting in San Francisco, brought together the community colleges, the CSUs, student aid, and we regularly ask them, what are you doing? How can we help? What can we focus on? And we found out there's a lot of disjoint, and it shouldn't be this way when we know the path. There should be a pathway. And so we're working on with K-12 and higher ed, dual enrollment, and transfer. We recently did a piece on how, when you are a student who qualifies for financial aid and you sign up at a community college, because now you're 18, why isn't there in the state a system that just automatically populates you for every benefit you're entitled to because you come below a certain level of poverty? Why isn't it populating for food? Why isn't it populating for medical coverage? Why isn't it populating for renter's credit? Why isn't it populating for earned income credit, child credit? Why, there you go. It's like, where is the difficulty here? I have time and time again said why we should publish where all of these sites, these help sites and these program sites live, so that one person knows them all. I learned that the California State Library actually might have this. Make a plug for the California State Library online. What an amazing institution that does wonderful things with websites you can access, most recently PPIC. So how long I had to knock on the state librarian's door to get that. But the point, and they also distribute to elementary schools, information to elementary schools. So PPIC takes these 8 areas, and we often partner with the different research teams to try to get the reports out. Where do you need data? Who has this information? And then we take it to the legislature on a regular basis. I've met with almost every single new member of the legislature, which was about 40 new ones this year. And we introduce them to PPIC's material. We tell them it's free. I love my opening line is, we're PPIC and we don't want anything from you except your opinion. Then they listen. Now, when I was chief and I'd walk into a legislator's office, I could hear them whispering, what does she want? Why is she here? What do you know? And now when I come in, those very same legislators greet me with a kiss. Because that's what we exist for. PPIC exists to provide the information, the data. It's nonpartisan. We often say our reports and our blogs and our fact sheets and our videos and our free speaker series events, they are neither Democrat nor Republican nor party preference, decline to state. It's information that could and should be used. But we're not advocates. So in other words, for the legal professionals in the world, we're not there pounding the table and saying this should be adopted. We provide the information. We give you what we need. Oftentimes I say, if we don't have it, we probably know a research organization that does have it if you need it. And we try to provide this information to build public policy, because as I have said to many people, as a lawyer and as a judge and as a justice and as the chief, in the judicial branch, I'm too often at the end of the stick. The law is already formed. Now I'm trying to decide if it applies to this situation. And many times it's not. It doesn't, because they never thought about this situation. Or they're just not addressing it. One of my most significant cases as Chief Justice of California was the Dynamex case. I still get in trouble when I run into business groups, because Dynamex was a case in California that finally told everybody who is an employee and who is an independent contractor. Businesses were really, really, really mad at me for saying, we're going to develop a 3-part test, and the presumption is on you, business, to prove this worker is not an employee. And so people say it's an unwinnable test for them. Well, it's only an unwinnable test when they should be an employee, not an independent contractor. And the reason for the whole theory of having to make that decision is because independent contractors have very little rights and protection. You can fire them, you can end the contract. But when an employee needs health care, family leave, rights with the labor commissioner, none of that applies if they are characterized as an independent contractor. And what happens very often, long tail, is if that person loses their job that they might have had for 7 years, they become someone who needs state services, which is all good and well, except we pay for state services. Whereas you, business, corporation, they were your employee, you should pay the services. And so my Dynamix was just a case, but it spawned legislation, AB 5, which then decided to characterize who was an independent contractor and who was an employee. If they couldn't, and then if they disagreed, they'd have to meet the test. It spawned at least 9 lawsuits in federal court. It was the gift that kept on giving. But it was my point is that in law, at the end of the stick, we're not the United States Supreme Court, so we don't make law. We try to interpret it and clarify it and direct it as we understand it. And many times when the California Supreme Court decides a case that is a first impression, so to speak, we say to the legislature, and you can change this, but this is how we read it, and these are the problems we see. So feel free to go in and make a law that rectifies this. But that's just it. It's rectified after there's been injury and damage and heartache and tension and trauma. But at PPIC, we try to be on the front end, trying to give the data to help better direct. It's more attenuated. It's a little more 30,000-foot level, but that information is out there. And in a daytime, and I don't know how you read the paper, but I have a reading list. And when I read it, I have to cross out half of the different articles because they're so full of opinion. They're so full of slant. And I don't want slant. What I want are the facts. Because with the facts, I can better understand the arguments, but I don't want to be indoctrinated by reading about it for the first time and having you tell me how you feel about it. And so at PPIC, I'm the Uber publisher, so everything has to pass through me before it gets out to the public. So there's a lot of reading, but we really seek to have that balance. We are nonpartisan. We are writing facts to help people better understand what is happening in the world around them, at least in those 8 policy areas. And so when we talk about redistricting, we have several blogs on redistricting. And as Joel said, our next Friday, our speaker series event is about redistricting, and we have a resident expert in-house at PPIC. You're not going to hear us say, yeah, Prop 50, no, Prop 50. We're not going to do it in any kind of, backhand, backwards, back of the hand way. We're really just going to tell you what the facts are. I'm going to moderate. We have a Democrat and we have a Republican consultants who are going to tell us about Prop 50. We do this. My favorite person I ever had the honor to interview, well, it's really between Leon Panetta, who sits on our board, because he told us about, the Bin Laden operation. But most recently, it was Jerry Brown 2.0. I said to my folks, Governor Brown has accepted this interview, but I'm just going to tell you, I have no control of the man. He's just going to say what he wants to say, do what he wants to do. I can ask him a question, but he probably isn't going to answer it. And so I said, so here we go. But of course, he was so wise and gracious. You could watch him on video. He was funny. He told people not to be stupid. I mean, which is, if you've been in a meeting with Jerry Brown, that's not unusual. But he was very professorial and very wise and very experienced. And we all really appreciated that he shared that side of himself with us. And we sometimes speaker series events are hit or miss, because you never know about who the panelists are until they start. And there's usually several of them. So we have to sort of get an energy going. But Jerry Brown had his own, and he was in rare form, and a lot of people loved seeing him on video. So I'm going to open up the mic, or happy to talk more, as most lawyers are, but happy to open the mic for questions. Yes, sir.
We need to have somebody to carry this thing around. I'll take it around. It's on.
Would you just comment about the Colorado River?
Yes. We study the Colorado River, and of course, that there are many states laying claim on the Colorado River, and the Colorado River is running out of water. And so there have been multiple agreements and negotiations about how to settle that water. Unfortunately, the court stands ready to do it, but you never want the court to divide your water. Adjudicated water is fine as long as you can come to agreement on adjudicated water. But right now, the Colorado River is unadjudicated. And we also are of the view now, to, as many people know, tribal water interests are playing a big part in the Colorado River distribution and adjudication, as that should. So I think we really have to make sure that we in California have to learn, and maybe it's really the Met that has to learn, that we have to find other sources. We have to find other ways to either conserve and or mitigate, because we can't rely as much as we did on the Colorado River.
Are they still passing around the policy forms?
And you can go to our website too, ppic.org, or just write
Okay,
PPIC.
great. I would like to get that. And then second of all, I was going to ask you, what is there going on with the history with the Lake Tahoe and the Native Americans? Is that protected kind of, or do we get anything? Does California derive anything for that? I know there was a big protection thing going on regarding Lake.
Yeah, that's a good question. We aren't necessarily involved in that yet, but our tribal water report's going to come out. But basically what it's going to do is educate and set the table. We do a lot of setting the table, so people come away having the same set of facts before people start to judge some of the settlements and some of, the behavior, right? There's a lot of ways to characterize tribal water rights. And first you have to look at California before, civilization, colonization, whatever you want to call it, when California tribes covered all of California. And now there's something like they're broken out into federally recognized, not federally recognized, and they're broken out into confirmed water rights, confirmed but not quantified. And so there's a lot of state or federal labels that we are going to write about in this report that will tell the story and also just clarify the facts. Mm-hmm.
You indicated that it's difficult to get the facts without a load of opinion. Where do you go, and where could we go in the public media to get the facts?
That's such a great question. I think that you can get the facts anywhere, but you have to really look for them. And you have to really put on your really critical thinking hat and really make sure that what you're reading is factual versus opinion. It's really active reading. I mean, I read all the legacy newspapers because I still think they're better than social media. But even when I read I probably read the Wall Street Journal as much as I can understand of it, to get the facts, and then it takes me to other sources. The same with the New York Times and Washington Post. I get the facts, takes me, but I don't accept their story. I get them, I'm like, are they telling the same facts? Are the facts repeating themselves? I don't listen to any or watch any social media. I just can't. And so a lot of it is active listening and just taking what you can get out of it and, knowing and using your radar about the information.
Hello. As a retired high school teacher, you mentioned civics, which I used to teach. What would you suggest might be included in the curriculum guidelines for high school civics here in California beyond what's going on now?
Thank you. Civics is a huge place in my heart. I think we should start civics in middle school, maybe even the end of 6th grade, and it should be taught regularly, because there are so many aspects of civics. Because I think that we should start with the U.S. Constitution, but point out that state constitutions can be even more protective, and that both of those documents are sources of authority and power for any legislature or Congress or executive branch and the judiciary. But I also think that the single greatest thing that we can teach young people about civics today, and we're doing it at PPIC, we have a Cal Civics program for high school and community colleges, is you have to talk with people, and you have to bring civility, and you need to listen, and you need to negotiate. And maybe you don't get everything you wanted in the first round, but there's always time to work, and you have to build trust and respect each other. So we're putting together, I just okayed the draft of a video of civics for young people. And we're going to put, it's like maybe 4 minutes with voiceovers and characters. And we're trying to get that critical thinking piece, and we're trying to get if you're going to be in government and represent people, you need to negotiate, you need to listen, You need to have relationship. You need to work across the aisle, kind of as Joel said earlier. I think the nuts and bolts are well taught and can be taught some more, but I think young people are missing the essence of civics is engagement, negotiation, civility, respect. It is compromise, and I feel like we've lost that.
I was interested in what you said about college professors coming to the high school. And I was wondering, there are so many young people that don't want to go to college for whatever reason, and they want to do things with their hands. And it used to be back in the day, that you had, shop, and you could teach kids so that, coming out, at least their appetite was whet so that they could go on from there. And is anything being done about that?
Thank you. That's a really good question. Right now, community colleges are working on what they call, and high schools are working on CTEs, right? Career technical education. And they're teaching the hands-on. For too long in California's public education and higher ed, the question has been career or college. And so we're trying to change the narrative to be career and college. So that you can get these CTEs, these certificates of technical education. You can get them in nursing. You can get them in a number of healthcare areas, maybe not as lucrative down the road, but you can stack them. So you can get a certificate, a CTE, and then you can come back a year later after you've had some experience in the field and then move on to get something else or higher. We are emphasizing CTEs as part of dual enrollment, as part of transfer, but we really think it's an and. One of the challenges with getting college professors into high schools is union issues and training issues, where we think maybe if we could get teachers, and it's a hard thing because teachers are so busy already, but to get a further degree so that they can also teach the college level, entry level English or math. Those are the two subjects at entry level that are the greatest barriers to transfer to a four-year university. So that's why we focus on those. There's some districts do it well with their community college districts, others don't. But we are seeing more and more the CTE, the stacking of certificates, the understanding that college isn't for everyone, but you shouldn't feel it's a binary choice for you at high school.
As a research-based organization, how are you dealing with the current national administration's push to minimize data that's available to the public and researchers such as yourself?
You are right. We are as reactionary as the next entity, right? We are lamenting not only the disappearance of data that was once publicly available, we're also in fear of the fact that there are threats that other data is going to go away, like NOAA, for example. And so we are writing, what we do is PPIC, we don't take a position because we're nonpartisan and we're a 501c3. So what we do is we write what the world would be like if there wasn't NOAA, the fact that when we don't have the data. But we're in good conversation with a number of different research institutes and public universities, academics, where we are talking and finding ways, and some of those places have captured some data. So we're still in the place where we're trying to get it. A lot of our data comes from data agreements with state agencies to get like EDD or CDCR corrections or Department of Health Services. We're trying to get that data for California because we're a California organization. And those are hard to come by too, believe it or not.
Oh, there we go. Okay, well, we're looking for more. Okay, could you comment about our goal in California to get as much solar as possible, yet we're allowing PG&E, Southern California, whatever it is, to charge much more for what we use than what we give?
Yes, that's a complicated question. So I have the opportunity to meet and talk with SoCal Edison folks and utility people and the Met. And what they tell me is not going to be surprising to you. And that is the energy infrastructure for utilities, water, solar, the pipes, the big pipes that move the oil in Kern and Bakersfield and Martinez, all of that is aging badly. They've been around for a long time, and they're aging without being repaired or just replaced. And so you see a lot of water agencies in particular, I'll just use that because this is a recent conversation, who tell me that we need to make the investment today. If we don't make the investment today, we're going to be sorry that we didn't do it 25 years from now. It's expensive now, but it's going to be worse 25 years from now. And if we can fix it now, we might be able to reduce prices over the long run. Now, I don't know about that last piece, but I do understand the aging infrastructure and the need to repair it, and the need that the way that these things are repaired is they pass on the cost of repair to the consumer through the rate increase. And California hasn't, California hasn't paid attention to infrastructure. Have you driven down Highway 99 lately? I mean, it's like it shakes your molars out. And that's just one example of our infrastructure. And we have, so I was talking to some of the gubernatorial candidates about, well, what are you going to do? And, I've heard, well, infrastructure isn't sexy. I know it isn't. We need a serious candidate who's going to fix it. I realize it isn't. But where are we if we don't, particularly if we don't do it now? So that's what I'm hearing.
Okay, my question relates to the education, the college, the trade school, all of that. My son is in computer science. He's very worried about AI. My nephew's in HVAC. He's not worried. He's got plenty of work. And I also hear that Gen Zs are coming out of college with a incredible unemployment rate. Very difficult to find entry-level jobs with college degrees, and of course, huge debt. So how are you addressing all of that, the impact of AI and the value of an education at this point?
No, everything you said is right on. It's all true. And I think the worst part of it is that all of that has existed for some time now, except AI. And so when I talk to people in the AI world, they tell me that if you think of your career and you think of your professional trajectory after college, just start from there, as a triangle, the longest, the hypotenuse maybe, I don't know, the longest line, what is it, base? Thank you. The base, see, I told this educated crowd, the base is being replaced by AI. So there's no entry-level jobs to get into to move into the middle part of the triangle. And I'm hearing this from health professionals, and I'm hearing it from computer science professionals. I'll tell you this, I heard this, took to lunch this Silicon Valley, president of something or other. And I asked him, tell me about what's happening in Silicon Valley and the history of Silicon Valley. And he said, in the 90s, he said, with the convergence of Stanford and Cal and these companies in the Bay Area, we inadvertently created the Silicon Valley. And in the 90s, we were pretty wealthy. We were millionaires in the 90s. And then he said in the aughts, which I think he meant the 2000s, in the 2000s, we became billionaires because we figured out that we could offshore the building of our ideas. So that's when semiconductors and whatever else they make in Silicon Valley got offshored and built in other countries. He said, we're still trillionaires in Silicon Valley because we the ideas come from us and we send it elsewhere to be made. And then he said, but with AI, we're going to become gazillionaires because, he said, we don't need as many people anymore in computer science to get us to these ideas that we're still going to offshore. I asked him, well, where is your team? And he said, my team is all over the world. They're in India, very few in California. So he has the ability to pick his talent from an international global market. And he told me, so where once upon a time, I would need 20 people on my team with AI. And the reason I'm going to make gazillions, because I now only need 7. And I said, well, what is the biggest problem in Silicon Valley? And he said, the wealth gap. The wealth gap is the biggest, because he said to me, they don't have anyone who really works near where they work, can never live where they work. So services is an issue. And I thought, that is a very first world problem. That to talk about, you don't have services because the people who work there can't live there. We understand that, but that was the cleanest piece of a Silicon Valley description I ever heard. And it tells you about the future.
So what are you doing for Gen Z, or what are you looking at?
Well, with Gen Z, we're trying to give them information to make choices. So we have a report coming out soon that talks about the healthcare field. We know it's going to grow. We know we need it. We know healthcare professionals, and we tell you the best places to get, the best things are sometimes to go to a community college and get a stackable certificate or a long-term certificate. You can get an RN at a community college for half the price. And then you can also get a dental hygienist a degree at a community college. You can take it elsewhere to get higher advanced degrees. We show a chart about how much money you can make in the healthcare profession. And we tell you it's regional because the most well-paid healthcare professionals work in or near or for or around a hospital, because a hospital can pay you the wages. So we talk about EMTs, radiological technicians. We know that RNs, there's going to be a lag, but then we think based on the numbers of enrollment that RNs are going to be plentiful. What the next big thing, the big surge, is now going to be radiological technicians, which is interesting to me because I just thought we offshored those. But according to the reports and talking to practitioners and talking to college professors who are teaching this material, radiological technicians are the next big wave. It's working with your hands. It's working with people. It's wanting to help and serve people. And with the aging generation of California, I mean, the governor created a master plan on aging. He rarely really does a master plan for a lot of things like that. It tells you the significance of it. So professions are pivoting and changing, and we're telling young people the value. We do a college explainer. Is college worth it? And we give you like 10 facts about why it's worth it. We know it's not for everyone, but if you do want to go, we tell you kind of the best way, how you can get money for tuition. The problem with college is you can't get funds to pay your rent and to buy food. That's why we need to sign up the young people, for those kinds of programs that gives them that assistance, which I don't think we're doing right now. We're not doing well enough.
Our last question comes from the Zoom audience, and I will just read, when I hear conclusions that continuing higher education as a positive goal, I think there's a white collar bias. The European model of vocational training mixed with practical STEM subjects seems to be needed more than professional directions. Am I mistaken if I hear accentuation on scholarly pursuits?
I would say you're not mistaken, but we're seeing the pivot to really more, not as scholarly, but CTE. But we do emphasize a foundation of some academic achievement because that pays dividends 10 years out from getting that degree.
So was this interesting? Yes. Thank you so much. All of that information that you talked about, we have, everything's up on your website, right? Okay. So we know where to go now to get it. And I'm thinking, I have grandkids that need to read some of what you just said about their future careers. Thank you so much for being here.